All right, cool. I'll get it started. I'm glad we had a few stragglers come in here right at the last minute. I figure it's a sunny day, so we might see some attrition from the RSVPs, but so far so good. Welcome to SeaRUG for a beautiful Wednesday in May. My name's David Diarza. I'll be your host here, and as usual, I like to get off the podium here as quickly as possible and hand it over to the people you really want to hear from. But a couple of things to take care of. First of all, today's agenda. I hope you're enjoying the beautiful lunch. So a couple of weekends ago, Lana and I went hiking and picked some berries, some blueberries, raspberries, and we've turned it into this beautiful cheesecake that's at the end of the, just kidding, it's too early for blueberry season. Anyway, today we are glad to welcome PPI back to SeaRUG. PPI, one of the long-term supporters of SeaRUG. We really appreciate it. And we've got David Campbell is going to tell us about Revit Structural, which has been a while, I believe, since we have looked at structural specific features. And even if you're not a structural engineer here in the room, I always find that it's great to understand what other stakeholders in the project go through and what they do in Revit. And you always learn something, and you can apply some of the techniques that maybe are used for grouping bolts and things like that. Maybe you can apply that to something else. That's always great. We're excited. And David, am I understanding correctly, you're fairly new to the area? Is it?
Yes, sir. I moved here from Indiana about 10 months ago.
All right. Well, now we SeaRUG, big warm welcome to the Pacific Northwest. I think you'll enjoy this area greatly. Certainly hope so. Just a shout out to our sponsors for the year. We used to make these things a little bit more meeting specific, but now we kind of like put everything in one big pot so that we can take care of the food and all that stuff. And even though PPI is sponsoring today's meeting, we of course have to recognize everybody else that is. I probably should there's a logo there that I need to take off because there was a little merger that you guys probably heard about. But anyway, this is how we keep things free to you, the end user. And we like it that way. Also, a big thank you to everybody that's on the board of SeaRUG. These are the folks that get together a couple of times a year and set the tone for the meetings and the policies. And we hope that you appreciate the quality of the presentations and the work that we put in for you guys, year after year. And if you guys are here, for those of you on the board that are here, we probably need to have a board meeting kind of halfway through the year board meeting here in the next few weeks. So I'll reach out to you and see if we can schedule that. And like I said, big thank you to PPI. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, and I think you've got a few words before David gets into his presentation. I think I did take off one slide. I sometimes have employment opportunity slides, and I don't have one, but Wendy, you had mentioned, was it Weber Thompson? Weber Thompson's looking for a CAD manager or BIM manager. If anybody's interested, I think I can actually put you in touch with somebody there, and I'm sure Wendy can as well. So if anybody wants to talk a little further about that, just come and see us after the meeting. Thank you very much. And Jesse, I'm going to give it over to you.
It's Tanya. Oh, my apologies. I get you guys confused. Well, thank you guys for having us. It's kind of fun to look back. We started as a sponsor in 2007, and here we are 11 years later. And I remember we crammed into the conference room or the basement of Lee Scrutcher Lewis. I think Mark King sponsored the first meeting, and here we are today. So I'm really happy to be a original sponsor, or PPI Group is. PPI Group, we have been in the Pacific Northwest since 1927. We have two offices regionally in Portland and Seattle area, South Center area. I call it Wren, Kentucky, because it's Renton, Tukwila, Seattle. Anyway. We recently in September, some of you may know, we were acquired by Topcon Positioning Systems based out of Livermore, California. So we are now PPI Group, a Topcon Solutions store. Now the store part of it confuses people. We actually have a retail store down in near IKEA, and we cater a lot to contractors. We get a lot of walk-in people that actually buy supplies for different job sites and whatnot. So 50% of our business is actually, we've been a 32-year partner with Topcon, and now they own us, but we actually sell positioning equipment, high-tech positioning equipment like laser scanners, total stations for layout, and then three-dimensional machine control for bulldozers, motor graders, excavators, pavers, that type of equipment. So we've been an Autodesk reseller for 30 years, and we offer all the implementation services and training. We're also a Bluebeam partner. David is actually one of our Bluebeam instructors, and we've been keeping him very busy with that area. So let's see. I've got our website up here. There's one thing. We've got an event coming up, and this is just go to our website, and we've got these technology road shows, and essentially it's going to take place in Seattle, actually just off of 196th and West Valley Highway. We're going to be doing live demos of different equipment. Got a number of different, we'll actually have an 18-wheeler out there to actually have presentations and whatnot to be done. So, and if you want to, you can get into a bulldozer or motor grader and drive it around and check it out. I do suggest you wear proper shoes when you walk out on this site, because it's dirty and dusty, muddy. So, so anyway, you can just sign up here. Just go to our website. You can pop in and pop out. We're going to have lunch served, and it's kind of a combination of live demos, and then also if you just want to swing by for lunch, you're more than welcome to.
Jesse,
Yes.
quick question. I'm in California that week. Can you keep the bulldozer for the next week?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. No.
I think we want to do that.
The bulldozer's pretty cheap. The motor grader's like $700,000, so I don't think we can keep that one around. But anyway, the rent on it is pretty high. So I want to just introduce you guys. We're also going to have our raffle at the end, so stick around. We've got two $50 gift cards to REI, so if you guys stick around, we'll draw that at about 1 o'clock. So David Campbell's been with us for 10 months. He came from Indiana. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and you'll notice that his very polite nature, he's got a good Midwestern. He says thank you quite often to me, and I appreciate that. So so without further ado, David Campbell, and we'll be around afterward. By the way, Tanya, that's not Wendy, that's Tanya. And so Tanya, myself, and David will be around afterward if you'd like to chat about anything.
Well, Wendy's Tanya's counterpart at another sponsor, so you would think that with the little numbers we have, I'd get the names straight.
You'd think so, but anyway, yeah, that's Tanya. So thank you.
Agent, she said, yeah.
All right, so actually while we're here, of course, my name's David Campbell. How's everybody doing today? So I did want to take a brief second here. I will be covering most of the what's new in Revit structure for 2019. If you guys are curious as to some of the other features, PPI will be hosting a webinar within the next, I think, month. I think it's in June, on all of the essential, like, what's new in Revit 2019. So if you guys were interested in something like that, it is on our website here under You're Invited. And you can go ahead and find, I believe it's going to post here later this month for next month, but we'll have a webinar on the new features. So here we go. Get into my PowerPoint here. All right, so again, my name is David Campbell. I am an application specialist for the PPI group. I specialize in Revit. I am a certified structure professional and a certified architectural professional for Revit. I also specialize in Bluebeam, so being able to go back and forth between those two programs has been a lot of fun, but I've also been able to kind of learn a lot. I gained my experience in the architecture industry, kind of Jesse brought it up a little bit. I did serve overall about 13 years in the Indiana Army National Guard, 2 deployments to Afghanistan. And after I came back home, I wanted to kind of change things up a little bit and got into architecture. I mean, architecture for me is just amazing. The way these buildings go together and the way that Revit allows you to make these beautiful 3D models is just fantastic. So I started out there, worked my way up, and eventually made my way out here to this beautiful part of the country. And I don't plan on going back to Indiana. I would not advise you unless you like corn and soybeans. There's a lot of that stuff in Indiana. All right, so I'm going to be covering what's new in Revit structure for 2019. All right, so starting out, this is an overall feature I think that would pretty much benefit everybody. So first off, they finally introduced some tabbed views into Revit. So what that means is, of course, easier access to open your views, improved docking and tiling, and then the close inactive views tools. So I'm going to get into Revit here, and I'll just open up my framing plans here. Okay, so essentially what you're going to see now is actual tabs. So I have my 3D view, but I also have my ground floor. So I can switch back and forth between these two. It's kind of nice to be able to just switch back, but you can also take these off and dock them. Okay, so you can dock them on the left portions, the right portions of the screen, or leave them floating. But you know what else is great about that? Switch back over here. We finally have multi-monitor support. All right, so if I did have another monitor, I'd be able to show that off, but essentially, you can just undock these now and then drag that view into your other monitors. So you don't have to grab that right portion of Revit and try to drag it over and then kind of working around it. I mean, that was annoying as crap. I know everybody here has done it. But yeah, you can undock those views now, drag them over, and again, you can cascade, tile your views in your other monitor. It will have full support, so you can just click over into them just like you're switching between your normal windows, okay? We will have that... Let me get in here. Okay. There we go. But of course, right up here, so if I dock this one back up over here, you're going to see that basically it was like the close inactive windows. It's going to look a little bit different, but really it's the same kind of tool. Okay. It's going to do the same thing here for us. When we click on that, it's going to take away that inactive view that I wasn't using. Okay. So that's pretty impressive. I do like that they finally came around to that for 2019. Okay, now into the structure. So for 2019, we have a detailed steel design capabilities. So what that means is we finally have the ability to model with detailed parts, such as creating your own plates and bolts and welds. So you'll be able to specify, draw out your plates, specify their thickness. You can specify the positioning of your bolts, the sizes, everything like that, and then actually create welds between your different elements, okay? And then we have a full steel toolbar for actually modifying your steel elements, such as like cutting and coping them. So I'll show it off here inside of Revit. Now I'm going to go through this PowerPoint, guys. I'm going to kind of show you what this can do, and then I'm going to actually model this a little bit inside of Revit to show you how some of these tools are working. Okay, I was having a heck of a time. I had to tell David last night. I was staying up because I had an Autodesk issue. Who hasn't experienced those? But I had my Windows profile, for some reason, would not let me get into my structural connections and all these other tools, but I've got that worked out now, finally. But, so I can't use my little control key there, but here's the steel toolbar right here. So that's a new add-in. And under that, you'll see, like last year, we had the structural connections right here, but they also integrated those into our actual steel connections. So you'll see that we have, of course, the regular generic connections, and then when we load them in, we have our other ones. But so right here, we have our new fabrication elements. So here's where we can specify our plate, our bolts. You'll see that we have bolts, of course, anchor bolts, or you can actually specify your holes. Okay, we can specify the positioning, the thickness, and everything of our holes, and then actually place shear studs as well. Okay, and then welds. So this feature is actually pretty awesome. You can specify the size of your weld. If you have, let's say, like some hollow beams, and you want to weld them together, you can actually specify the gap between the two and then weld them together and specify your welds. Yes, sir. Well, essentially, yes, it does. What it does is it joins them together and essentially places like a generic connection. So it connects them together. and it's going to place this little box around it, and it'll actually be like one kind of connection. But I'll show you a little bit different, something else here in a second as well. The modifiers. So this is actually very nice. I don't know if a lot of you have worked with trying to place beams and going into a column, or if you have any type of beam that's at an angle going up into another column or another beam, right? You can actually specify if you want to cut them or skew your columns and beams now, or actually different parts. So we can, of course, corner cut, which is going to maybe place a corner like a fillet on a plate, which is nice. But then actually you can skew your cope here to adjust how they're actually landing on each other. So if you have some, trying to think, bar joists and you're trying to place them onto the beam, you can actually like essentially cope them and skew them and cut it so it'll sit just right on your beam, okay? And then shorten. So this is essentially like a trim feature, a trim or extend feature for beams and columns. So if you need to take it back off the face, like maybe let's say you're going to place a plate on the face of a beam and you want to give that space, you could essentially just use the shorten tool to specify like that 1 inch or 2 inch for your plate gap, okay? And then an actual contour cut. So if you want to place a cut on the face of a beam or plate, this is what you would use, which is actually very nice, okay? And then our parametric cut tools. So we have our cope, miter. So the coping tool is nice because I don't know if a lot of you, like I said, have worked with these before, but on like the W-wide flanges, right? You're going to have your flanges on top, and in the center, you want it you want your web to carry forward and try to attach. Well, a lot of times it was kind of difficult to specify that without having them overlap. You know, there's plenty of workarounds, but now we have the ability to just essentially click the two beams or columns that you want to join together, and it will cope them automatically for you and kind of create that connection, okay? And then our miters. So with a miter, you have the ability to create, of course, an actual miter, a saw cut with the flange, and then a saw cut with the web, I'm sorry. So we can actually cut those according to how they intersect on other beams. Okay. The cut through here you're going to see is actually allows you to cut through a model element around the contour of another maybe intersecting model element. And then it's going to automatically create a weld for you and place it there between those two intersecting elements. And then a cut by. Maybe you want a beam to kind of go through it. It's going to create a cut on a model element along the shape of another and then cut through the actual element. Okay. And then of course it's going to create a connection between those two elements. Okay, so I'll get back into here. And this is, of course, going to allow us to start creating more accurate steel design models. And you know what's great about this is as we start going through this and start specifying our bolts, specifying our plates, you know, things like that, it allows you to tie into, advanced steel. So what they're trying to do now, it seems like, is tie advanced steel into Revit for better structural designs or more well-rounded designs. So when you send your actual, plates and bolts, you can actually create schedules off them. I'm going to show them here in the next slide, but you can start specifying these elements and get a little bit easier to start manufacturing these parts. Okay. So here I just have a couple pictures of a plate that I had drawn. I'm actually going to draw one here in the model as well. But this just goes to show that it's going to be very easy. It essentially is like any other element where you're using your draw tools, right? Draw a rectangle, specify, maybe do an offset. To create your plate, you can specify the thickness. It's an actual plate family, so we can go through and create other plates of different sizes, so we can go through and tag those as well. And then drawing your bolts in here, and we can dimension to those bolts, okay? As well as here, so I talked about that, it's a little blurry up there, but I talked about the miters and the welds, right? So this is just showing you up here, like if we have those hollow column, or those hollow, tubes up there, we can go ahead and miter them together, and it's going to bring up this little edit parameters box there, where you can specify your gap and then actually specify your weld size as well. And then this is the box that it's actually going to show you here. When you miter two items together, that's essentially the connection that's being made. So you can click on that. And then when we join the miter together, you're going to see in the lower left-hand corner, this one right here, it's going to give us, you guys remember the generic connection symbol? It's It's going to give you kind of something like that to where you can actually click on it and then work with that miter or weld, okay? All right. So, along with 2019, so we had the ability to use our standard connections in 2018, which was finally pretty awesome, right? But the great thing about 2019 is you no longer have to have a structural connection add-in. It comes directly with the program, okay? So there's no separate add-in that you have to wait on and upload. And then they give us the ability to create custom connections. And when I say that, I mean, you go through, you're placing your plates, right? You place your bolts, maybe you have some stiffeners on there, and you'd like to be able to use that connection more than once. So what they allow you to do now is essentially create a group from those different elements inside of that. So my bolt, my plate, all my stiffeners here, I can connect all of those together, join them all together, and make them a custom connection that I can then save and then use in other projects. I can copy and paste them together or save them and use them in other projects, kind of like a group, like you normally would. Yes, sir?
When you define that kind of connection, place it in another location, go like bolts to your operations to determine the
Yeah, actually, what's nice is, yeah, so you're asking if the bolts transfer through? Is that what you're asking, or?
If they do tooling, they actually modify the beams that are attached.
Yes, sir, they do. Yep, they modify the actual beam. So if I mean, you can see here in this picture here, it's actually going to connect it on the face, but the bolts will go through. Actually, it'll drill the holes and everything. So when I'll show you this one here in a little bit. When I delete that plate off and I delete those bolts, it's still going to leave the holes there for my bolts. So it actually adjusts that other beam. Okay. And then when you bring it in and you attach that connection to other beams, it'll adjust those as well as you place that connection. Okay, and here's, it's going to show you, I just have a few more pictures here of ones that I had drawn up. So you're going to see that we have those bolts there. We can grab that plate and then join them all together as a custom connection. Okay, now, along with all of this, they've given us the ability to document these steel designs. Okay, so we can start making the actual engineering drawings using dimensions and tags on our plates, on our bolts, everything. Okay, so you can start specifying those, tagging it, and then of course creating actual bolt and plate schedules, which I think was actually pretty awesome. Okay. And here, it's going to just, there's a couple pictures here showing you some of the custom plates. There's a custom plate up here with the bolts up there in the upper left-hand corner. The right-hand corner here shows us a bracing arrangement. So I took this into like a detailed view. And you can see how everything goes together, actually place those dimensions and your tags, kind of zoom in, do a call out there if you need to. And then the bolts and plate schedules are pretty much like any other schedule inside of Revit. Okay. They have also brought in a free-form rebar shape matching tool. So I'll be showing this one as well. They've finally given in to the shape recognition as well as the actual shape code assignment. So now instead of like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can actually see your different types of rebar, and it'll actually have it inside of the properties browser over there, and you can specify the type or the actual number of rebar that you want to use. And then that also enables schedules for fabrication, so we can start actually scheduling out our rebar for fabrication purposes. And this is going to enhance our 3D modeling and communication for the fabrication instructions. Okay. And then the automation. So we have the ability to create precast. Well, I'm going to say you have the ability for precast automation in your slabs or your concrete walls. Like if you have an actual precast concrete slab or an actual wall, you can specify the reinforcement that you want inside of it. You can actually split model elements, such as if you have a full concrete wall, you can split it and make them into the actual precast items and specify whether it's the rebar, how they tie together, whether it's a hook and end and you run rebar down through or whatever. You can specify how you do that. And then, so over there it's showing the slab properties, right? We have a hollow core slab, the solid, or you can specify whether you want the actual girders to run inside of that concrete slab. You can also start specifying their actual offset from each other, the layout. And then they gave us an export, CAM export, and PXML. Okay, let me go into here, and I'm going to start kind of showing you guys some of this stuff here. So, get into this one here. There we go. So, we'll see here that I have a few different columns, things like that, right? Well, we just would load our new connections. So to load any of the custom connections, except for the generic, you will need to go into the actual connection, or the structural connection settings to bring them all in. And they will give you, gosh, I think there's almost 100 of them. There's quite a few different connections here. You'll see that we have a large library of different types of connections. And again, we can customize these connections now. You could not do that in 2018. We can specify if you want to change the bolt patterns, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring these in. Of course, you wouldn't bring all of these in, but I'm going to go ahead and just bring these in, say OK. OK. Now I can go ahead and specify what type of connection I want to place here. So it's probably going to be a moment connection here. Actually, I'll go with moment end plate here. Specify my elements. Enter. Now, on these here, to view these, we will need to change our actual view settings. So, of course, you do need to go into Find View. But since they actually have allowed us to go ahead and see those different items, you'll see we start seeing it there. But as I go into Wireframe is now where I can completely see that actual connection there. So I can see my bolts, I can see how it places through. Okay. So it's cut through that beam there for me. Okay. And if I click on that little connection, I got to get in a little bit tighter to it. Gosh dang it. Where is it? Where's my filter tool? Under Modify. Where's my filter tool? Sorry, I'm trying to find my filter tool here. They moved it. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. It's not, keeps wanting to switch to the column here. All right. There we go. All right, so I can find my structural framing. That's not pulling it. Okay, maybe I'll try a different one. But anyways, so we can create those, right? And actually, I'm going to go into and open. I'm going to go ahead and open my project 2 here. This one will show it a little bit easier here. So let me go into my 3D view here. Okay. If I want to specify how this maybe connects there. So again, here's that steel column here, the steel tab. So I can specify I want to weld them together, I want to join them together, or cope or miter them. So I can go ahead, maybe choose a miter here, my steel. You will need to select both items and then essentially click Enter to activate them. Come on, just grab my beam. There we go. Steel and miter. So you'll see there it's automatically going to join them together for me and cut it, right? And then it's going to show me this little box so I can edit the properties. So you'll see the new connection options here are break. So if you want to break that connection, here's where we can customize that connection. This is how you start creating that custom connection, okay? We would customize it, select our other options or items to add into this connection. So I'm going to do that one again here in a second. But I'm going to grab onto that miter and show you guys the modify parameters. So modify parameters is where we would get into to specify that gap. So we can put maybe a 3-inch gap, and then maybe specify, I can't type today, a 3-inch weld. Okay? So we can specify that, and then you'll see right inside of there, now we have that a little, essentially like a weld miter symbol that it's going to give us in there to allow us to edit it further. Okay? You can also use a bisecting line, things like that. Okay? Now, again with our connections. So here, if I bring this back, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to miter these together. I'm going to weld them. I'll create a plate, some bolts, and then I'll show you guys how to essentially create a custom connection here for it. So I'm going to go ahead, these two, go to miter, this one and that one, enter. All right, so we'll see it brought them together there for me. You see it joined them together there for me. And then I can go ahead and modify that parameter. And this time maybe do a 2-inch gap and specify a 2-inch weld. Okay. And then we can go ahead, grab these two, steel, miter. Okay. And of course grab back in there. You know what? I don't like that gap being that size. So maybe I'll change this one. Okay. But again, now we have, these have been all joined together. At least these two items are essentially joined together with this miter, and then this option is joined together with this one here because of the miter. Okay, now you can, of course, take those gaps down and make them look like they're essentially right on top of each other. So if I did grab back into here, there we go, modify. I can always go back and adjust that gap and adjust that weld at any point in time. And then it is keeping track of these welds for us, so we can schedule these welds now as well. Okay, so we can go through and schedule our welds. So I'm going to go ahead and shorten this one here. I'm going to bring it back because I want to bring this here. So you got to select your item and the item that you want to go off of, so you'll see it cut it there for me. I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to bring that back. Let's go. That was way too much. You know what? I'm just going to make a 2-inch plate there. That's, well, let's make like a 3. It's not giving it enough for me. That should be good. All right. Now also, if I get into maybe my level 1, so I can go ahead and close out of these here. WT. Okay, so I can kind of see what I'm doing here. And what's nice about this is it allows you to actually draw, so I'm going to click on this here. It actually is going to allow us to draw this plate in the 3D mode, right? And you'll see it's going to bring up my regular draw tools. And I can also set my work plane if I need to. If you are working at an angle or anything like that, you can specify your work plane. I'm going to go ahead and draw this. Okay. Something like that. There we go, a little bit off. Okay. You say okay, and then now we can go ahead and specify the thickness of it. Now I do need to place that back on the face there. Maybe I need to get into east elevation. No. I'm jumping all over the place, aren't I? There we go. So maybe I'll come in here, draw my plate. And of course, it wants me to go back into another view, the view that it makes sense in. It won't let me do it. All right. Actually, set my work plane, pick my plane here. Good Lord. I apologize, guys. This is being a little annoying here for me. Come on, just pick my plane. There we go. There we go. Finally. All right, so there I can specify that thickness. Maybe bring it out. Apply 1 inch. And it put it back into my beam, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Okay, you'll see my plate there. I need to bring it out to the face of my actual beam. I don't know why it didn't do that for me. Steel, shorten. Okay, anyways, so we can draw our plate out, and then for our bolts, what it's going to do is ask us to select a plate. Okay, so once you select that plate, what it's going to do is bring up a, there we go. All right. It's going to bring up a box, essentially, for us to draw these in. Okay. Why are you not working here? Steel. You're going to place these right on the edge of your plate, and what it's going to do is ask us to draw out a, it's going to ask us to draw out a square, essentially, around our plate to specify the overall, which, why is this not working for me? Come on. Thank you. Why? There we go. Thank you. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll specify an overall, like maybe, let me go over here and specify the overall size here, or the outer layers of your bolt pattern. And there they go. Okay, so our bolts have been created. They've gone the thickness of our plate. They'll automatically drill the holes for us. And then you can come over here into the properties browser. See that we have our standard types of bolts. So you'll have an entire list of bolts here that we can use. You can change their grade, of course, the diameter, so you can specify the diameter of them, their assembly, any type of coating, the numbers. But I think one thing that we'd want to make sure we're looking for is going to be this mark, okay? Under the identity data there, if we can type in for our mark, that's going to allow us to tag these bolts and then schedule them, all right? So I'm going to change these back down. Just do something like that. Oh, no. There we go. Okay. All right. And then any type of weld is going to allow you to kind of connect these together. You can specify them, like I said, or create those together. Now, when I go back to my connection, okay, and I have here, maybe I'll click this, click these, go back to my connection. That's right. So again, to make a custom connection here, we have to first start out making a generic connection. So that's what we're going to start off with, is a generic connection, then add your items together to that connection to actually make it a new custom connection. So I'll grab this, and then my beam here, if I can select it, there we go. Join those together, customize, and I'll just call this a custom connection. And I'll go ahead and add this in here, and then add those, and maybe I want to go ahead and add my beams in. Okay, I'm going to say finish. So now you'll see when I select my plate, it comes together as one. So what I can do is do something like this now, and then hold down Control, grab my plate, my connection back here, and then I can go ahead and let's just do and go ahead and copy and paste those elements down as one. Okay, So that's pretty easy. And of course, you can go through now, and if I come down to my schedules here, when I right-click down here, of course, we're going to see the typical schedules, but we'll come down under the structural connections. So you'll see we have an actual structural connections category now. And when we expand that, then you're going to start seeing your anchors, bolts, plates, your profiles, shear studs, and welds. So if I wanted to, I could create a bolt schedule here. And sorry, move that out of my way. Okay. And now, of course, specify your fields. So I can maybe go with count, make sure I grab my mark, and then grab my diameter. And then click OK. And here it is. Since I didn't place any marks on them, it will show me here, but it's going to show that these are essentially the different types of bolts that I have placed in here, okay? And then I can come down, find my structural connections. There we go. Find my plate. And then again, I'm going to just use count, mark, place my thickness in there, and let's do comments. And there's our new plate schedule. So this is nice for actually going through detailing those items, scheduling them, and then you can send them out to the actual fabricators, okay? Now, let me go back into my level 1 here. Okay. Gosh, I forgot where I was going. You know what? Maybe I'll show that. There's another, that's just another custom plate that I've drawn here to show kind of how you could take a column down, and it's any shape really. You can draw these plates and then have your specify your different bolt patterns, weld your column down to it, and create that connection, then copy and paste it all around your other footings. It really just takes a couple minutes to be able to draw these out. You guys have any questions with those, with the custom connections or drawing the plates, bolts, anything like that? Yes? Yes, you can. Yes, sir. So if I come into, go back into my level 1 here, and maybe find my view. There we go. I can do, I'm trying to think of what I want to use here. Probably a framing elevation. It's not going to, probably an elevation is actually going to be better. Gosh dang it. Come on. There we go. Why am I not seeing any of my other options here? All right, well, you know what? Here, let's just do it from here. See if I can. It will allow me to actually dimension to, if I'm in wireframe. You have to be in wireframe to dimension to the center points of your bolts and to actually see the different bolts. Grab my aligned, and I can grab the center points of my bolts. Come on. Okay, so I can grab the center points of my bolts, and I can grab all of my different options inside of here and actually create the detailed drawings off of them. Now, honestly, it's going to be better to go through and create a detailed view or drafting view off of these, and then maybe place a view inside of there and then go through and detail them out, draw them. And then, of course, we can now, if I go under annotate here, find my tag by category. All right. Maybe I'll just find them here then. Tag by category. You can actually tag your structural connections, but if I wish I would have ungrouped these, break it. There we go. There we go. Annotate, tag by category. Okay, so you're going to see that we can actually tag those individual items as well. So we can tag our individual bolts, you can tag the plates, all the different items inside of your connection, but you do have to break them first. That's the only part that kind of sucks about it, is you have to break your connection. Did you have a question, or was that just? Okay. Anybody else have a question on those? Yep.
So is there a way to show
Thin lines? Oh, yeah, thin lines are right. Yeah, yes, sir, right up above. Is that what you were kind of at? What's that? Oh, center lines. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was having trouble hearing you. All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe so. It's going to be under the structural connections. I think we should be able to find for plates and bolts here so we can specify our different types. Well, that's going to be for the actual object styles and things like that. But under, where is that, line styles, line types, we should be able to find that. Where's that, manage? Line styles. I know these have center lines. That's how you dimension them, but you can turn them. So I think you go into line styles to turn that on and off, right? To turn on. What's that? Oh, the actual center lines. You can't. Yeah. Let me see if I can get into. I'm trying to see what. The actual center point there, yeah, the actual center marker. What's that? There we go. Annotate, aligned. Yeah, there it is. It's giving us the reference point there, but it should be actually coming up. When I did this earlier, it came up with an actual center point to the bolts with the line. I can also grab this one, essentially do something like this here. What's that? Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Oh, yeah, and find the actual, so if I, just, it might be under annotations. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you know, honestly, earlier I had it going for me, and I was able to dimension to those. I don't know, like right here, it's going to show me just like that there, right in the middle of my bolts. I'm not sure if maybe it's because that one's still grouped together. It's giving me the reference point there in the center, but not giving me my actual. Okay. But yes, it is. It will show you those center lines. I know I did this earlier. I don't know why it's not working for me now. Just typical Revit, I guess. Typical Revit. I can't. Yeah. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Right. And what was the other question? Somebody else had one? No? Okay. All right. So let me go into my. Get out of this. Okay. Bring up my other views here. No. I'm going to go into my structure, my concrete structure framing here. So we get into this here. We'll go into wireframe. So when I go ahead to place my rebar here, why is it? There we go. Of course, it's going to bring up my rebar shape browser, but now you'll see that we have the actual schedule mark here and the shapes here, so we can specify those without going through and picking in our actual rebar shape browser. So I need to essentially select something like that. Well, I'm going to use rebar shape 1, near cover. Gosh dang, what just happened? Come here. There we go. Okay. But of course, now we can also go ahead and use the, what is that, properties match. Here we can match type properties and actually just create, like if I create another piece of rebar up here, I'll go ahead and use the same, or different, I'll grab a shape 3 here. That one might not work, but we'll see. Select my rebar down here. Go ahead and match type properties. Select this one. It's going to go ahead and change it now. It changed it to be up and down for me. I don't know why, but it'll actually match the shape of your rebar now as well. So that's pretty nice. I don't know why it turned it there for me, but, or shortened it. Yeah, just shortened it, really. There we go. Go ahead and grab it there. Okay, but again, in our properties browser here, you'll see we have that schedule mark, the shape, and then we can specify here. So this allows us to kind of adjust our actual rebar. You can specify that you want the hooked ends on them, and if you want a standard or 90 degree, anything like that. And then any rounding overrides. So we have these actual rounding overrides where if you want to round the bar to the nearest increment, you can do that as well, which is very nice because nobody in the field wants to cut a bar to like a 16th of an inch. All right. And then, of course, our visibility states, so we can actually start specifying where we want to view them as obscured or solid. Now, before, you would typically, we had a PPI Revit briefcase, and you could actually go through and use our obscure or unobscure tool to make the rebar visible when you place it inside of a concrete wall. That's essentially what this is doing now. So you can say view unobscured, and what it's going to do is essentially like gray out that concrete wall a little bit, and then it's going to go ahead and bring out the rebar, so it's going to give it that solid black line and make it stand out a little bit better for us. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh.
But if you were in really cold climates, you would have to have a certain environment of protection concrete on top of it.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there a way to make sure that it animates that tolerance?
Yeah, so essentially you're talking about like the offset from the face of the concrete to give it that 2 or 3 inches off the face. Yeah. So on something like that, yes, I believe that we can specify that, but it's going to be placement. No, where was that? It's free-form rebar here, but I can't remember where that was. Placement is parallel to the cover. No, that's the wrong one. Parallel to the work plane. You know what? We might not be able to. I thought there was where we could specify that offset there. What's that? Oh, yeah, the parallel to cover. Yeah, that's right. So that's the, thank you. That's going to be the parallel to cover here. So that'll place it, I believe, perpendicular to it and be able to give you that. Maybe if I do something like this here. See, it's going to actually, like it'll show me those green lines there. Those are like a drawing alignment line. And it'll give me that offset there, and when I place it, yeah, unless you use an actual rebar set, and then you can specify your alignment or your layout there as well. Yeah, so we can go into the rebar set, and with my layout, I can choose fixed number, maximum spacing, all that kind of stuff, and then do a varying rebar set. If you have a different height of a wall, the height of your rebar or length of your rebar will vary by the height of that wall overall. Okay. And then I think, yeah, so in this here, let me go into my 3D view. We've got a few more minutes. Okay, so on something like this, I have a full concrete structure here, okay? And what I wanted to show you guys was this precast tab that we have now right here. You'll see that we can split our actual concrete, split the precast, actually specify our different mounting parts or additional mounting parts to precast assemblies. We can, again, choose our reinforcement, and then under reinforcement, you can have an actual configuration, like saving these figurations, and it's going to render our, specify the guidelines for rendering these, and it's going to be like a custom fabric sheet that we can place, which, again, is just right here next door. But this actually is very cool. I really want to show this tool. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to synchronize all of these precast families, essentially, right into my project, right? And once I go through, I'm going to split one of these walls here, and I'm going to take it right into one of these shop drawings. I think this is pretty sweet because it takes it and transitions it right over, creates all of your views for you automatically. Okay. Now this will be an add-in. You guys would have to go to that Autodesk, the connector, desktop connector, and you can find this add-in right in there. Okay. So when I just hit finish, I'm going to split this. You'll see that it's automatically going to place for me. Okay. See, it's placed it all my lifters in. It's split that block for me. If I go into my level 1, find that wall, change it into fine detail, go back up into wireframe, and there you go. So it'll show me, and I can go ahead and select my different part assemblies. Okay, and it did that for me automatically. Okay, now I can just go ahead and take a shop drawing of this item here. Okay, I'm going to say finish. It'll take a couple seconds, but it'll automatically create these for me, and I can transition through them. Okay, you'll see here it's dimensioning out my wall for me completely, giving me all of my different, like my actual volume of the wall, my parts list here, my rebar if I did apply any rebar inside of it. And then it's actually created, of course, the solid wall, so it's created a couple sheets for me because I did create, since I split that wall, it essentially created 2 precast elements. So it placed both of those onto sheets for me and created a part list for me. And then there's another sheet for the third part of that wall. Okay, it's going to go ahead and give me all that right off the bat. Okay, do you guys have any questions on these? No? Okay. Well, here real quick. So I talked about this one earlier again. Here I'm going to go back to precast and split. If I split this floor, you'll see that it's going to give me a few different types. I have a solid slab, the hollow core slab, or the actual girder slab. So I can say OK. And it's going to break these down into individual parts for me. And then when I go down into fine, and I'll go into wireframe. Oh, maybe not wireframe. Yeah. You can see that it's split it out for us. And I can specify my rebar covers. And then if I want to, go precast, reinforcement. Okay, specify the reinforcement that I want in my slab, whether I'm going to do a girder or whatever. And it places them for me automatically down the length of it. Now, those are a little ridiculous, but you'll see it's so simple to do. I can just reinforcement. Maybe I'll go type 2 here. Okay. And it generates them for you automatically. Okay. These do have different properties here as well. All right. So do you guys have any other questions? No? All right. Yes, sir.
The type of automated shop drawing showed for the precast.
Yes.
Is there any similar functionality on the steel?
Not as of yet that I've seen, no, unfortunately. That would be nice though, wouldn't it? Be able to go ahead and just label those all out for you automatically. That would be pretty awesome. But not yet. Maybe let's see if they bring it in an add-in. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, well, it's going to have some typical wood framing. You can specify the type of studs you want to use into your like your structural framing drawings, and actually do the stud layout and everything like that. But apart from that, no. You will find I have found several like add-ins. Yeah, they have the add-ins, but nothing default into Revit yet like that. All right. Well, anything else? No? Well, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me.